General, we want to switch the stage. While they're moving the chair, if you'll just follow, if you want to stand up really quick, like for 30 seconds and sit back down, because the Attorney General will be here. So don't go anywhere, but stretch your legs for 30 seconds while we move. This commission serves under the Department of Justice. So it gives me another chance to spend time with and see a friend of several years, our Attorney General. Pam Bondi was appointed as the 87th Attorney General in this country. Her background, she was a prosecutor in Florida for 18 years. She handled everything from domestic violence to capital murder. She was elected as the first woman Attorney General in the state of Florida in history in 2011, where she served through 2019. And when she came on board, she took on the opioid industry. Florida at that time had 98 of the 100 pill mills, the biggest pill mills in the country back in the days of Oxy. And she came in and got tough legislation passed. We're focused on some of those things in Texas right now, as a matter of fact. And so she was very successful in taking that industry down. And then she was appointed under the president's first term to the Drug Abuse Commission. And then, as you know, she has just done an outstanding job as our Attorney General. She is the sweetest person you'd meet and the toughest. My friend, our Attorney General, the 87th of the United States of America, please stand for Pam Bondi.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Patrick, for your leadership and for stepping forward to chair this great commission. The commission's work not only comes at a time when the world so desperately needs it, but it's vital to addressing the emerging threats to religious liberty and protecting Americans' First Amendment rights. I know we'll all continue to pray. It's been a very long weekend, given what's happening in Israel and Iran, and also the horrible, horrible murders in Minnesota. So I know we'll continue to keep all of them in our prayers. Hi, Dr. Carson. Chairman Patrick, your dedication to faith and freedom make you uniquely qualified to chair this, and thank you again for your friendship for all these years and for chairing this. And Pastor Paula, I think this is the first time in our history that the Office of Faith is located in the West Wing of the White House, so thank you. I'm profoundly grateful to the members of this commission and to the advisory board for generously offering your time, your insight, and your commitment to such an important topic. Your willingness to serve speaks volumes about your passion for one of humanity's most sacred rights, which has come under attack. On May 1st, President Trump took bold action and signed an executive order establishing the Religious Liberty Commission. President Trump's action reaffirmed our nation's enduring commitment to the freedoms of our founders. It reminded us that faith was built into the foundation of our nation's founding documents. There was no mistake when it was included in the First Amendment. Our founding fathers understood that every individual must be free to worship without fear, without coercion, and without government interference. They also understood the liberty of conscience is the cornerstone of religious freedom. A well-formed conscience is our God-given ability to discern right from wrong and good from evil. James Madison referred to one's conscience as the most sacred of all property. From the start, the United States of America was envisioned as a place where religious liberty meant the freedom to discern good from evil without the heavy hand of the government weighing in. President Trump has charged this commission with helping all Americans become, and I quote, reacquainted with our nation's superb experiment in religious freedom in order to preserve it from emerging threats. Sadly, over the last 4 years, that promise came under assault. The federal government became complicit in sheltering these threats, becoming the greatest threat itself. Pro-life Christians were arrested for peacefully praying near abortion clinics. Violent radicals blocked access to synagogues, and religious services were shut down under the guise of safety. The FBI surveilled Catholics in their places of worship. Permits to build mosques were slow-walked or disallowed without cause. And this past year, President Biden marked Easter Sunday, the holiest day in the Christian calendar, as Transgender Day of Visibility. No longer. Since January 20th, this is what President Trump's Department of Justice has done. We've dropped FACE Act cases involving pro-life advocates. We're fighting for the rights of parents to protect their children from transgender books in schools that violate their religious faith. We're rooting out anti-Semitism in universities and other American institutions, and much more. Let this commission serve as a reminder. Elections have consequences, and this president and this administration are fully committed to restoring and defending religious liberty for all Americans. The Religious Liberty Commission will be the tip of the spear. Together, we will return America to the vision of our founders, a nation where faith merely isn't tolerated, but it's embraced and celebrated. I'm honored to serve as a member of this commission, but also to call the Department of Justice its home. I can assure you that DOJ will use every legal and constitutional tool available to ensure Americans can live out their faith freely without fear. I am filled with hope for what lies ahead. I believe this commission has the authority and the experience. I'm looking at all of you. Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Phil. Necessary to restore religious liberty to its rightful place and elevate solutions on the world stage. Thank you to each of you who answered this call. Your faith, your courage, your conviction will leave a lasting legacy. Thank you, Bishop. May God bless each of you, your families, our great country, and this noble endeavor. Thank you, and have a great conference.
So we are right on schedule. We have one more witness for our morning call, and we will have time for Professor Barbara Elliott, once we reset the stage, to come and speak, and time for questions. And then at noon, we will break for lunch. For those of you who have not been to the Museum of the Bible before, welcome, and we thank them for allowing us to have our hearing here. For those of you who are watching online, it's a must place to visit when you're in D.C. And for those of you here, if you haven't seen it, and I forget what floor it's on, but it flies you over the city of Washington, so you can see where all of the Ten Commandments and all of the inscriptions are on all of the buildings. So as long as you don't get a little sickness, which I don't, go there. It's a great experience before you leave today. It's just wonderful. So when we break for lunch, you can break for lunch. We're going to start, I believe, on keeping the trains running on time. So we'll start exactly at 1 o'clock. So if you'll be back in your seats by then. And right now, I'd like to introduce, we get the chair in place. There we go. Professor Barbara Elliott serves as a fellow of the Dominican School of Philosophy and Theology and an assistant professor of liberal arts at the Houston Christian University. Professor Elliott's work in human rights, including documenting the stories of those whose faith inspired them to resist communism, and her experience in public policy, provide a unique and essential perspective on the role of religion in a vibrant and free society. Professor, welcome, and the microphone is yours for the next 10 or 12 minutes.
All right, thank you very much.
There you go.
All right, we got sound. Thank you very much, Commissioner, and all of you. It's a delight to be here with you, to meet some of you in person. Yeah, this is marvelous. Thank you that we can talk about something that is really important to our country. People of faith have given our culture a unique strength throughout our history. Without their awareness of the transcendent realm, the American founders could focus beyond the temporal in a search for meaning and a purposeful existence. They knew that the moral and spiritual strength of the people was crucial in making civic order possible. Long before the Constitution, people of faith were forming small units of order, cells of civil society, for their own self-governance and for helping one another. Before the first settlers even set foot on Plymouth Rock, they bound themselves to each other and to God in a form of government derived from covenant theology of the Old Testament, the Mayflower Compact of 1620. This was derived directly from the covenant of the Old Testament, which bound Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to the great I Am. These people promised to live in accordance with his law. Our Constitution has the same roots. Faith and family were the bedrock of thriving communities where good character was instilled, along with personal responsibility and a willingness to help others. When a barn burned down, neighbors would band together to build a new one for them. Or if parents were killed, parents of young children, a neighboring family would take them in as their own. That was a natural expression of their Christian charity. This vibrant goodwill in early America provided charitable assistance to the sick, the elderly, the senile, widows with children, unwed mothers, and the unemployed. Education was also a high priority. People of faith in the colonies were instrumental in founding schools. Harvard College, for example, was founded in 1636, St. John's College in 1696. Americans created voluntary civic organizations, hospitals, all kinds of things. When Alexis de Tocqueville visited the country in the 1830s, he was dazzled by this wide array of private voluntary associations and the goodwill that they harnessed to serve others. This was very different than the culture in Europe, where the government and the church were the prime movers. Now, I experienced this firsthand when I lived in Germany in the 1980s. I launched a small private initiative to reach out to people who were fleeing communism and coming to us in West Germany. My skeptical neighbors said, "Oh, that's so American," somewhat disdainfully. Well, yes, it is American. John Adams claimed our Constitution was made only for a moral and a religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Previous speakers have referenced this. Civic order has most often flourished where it has rested on the moral and spiritual strength of the people who are governed from within. The most potent and powerful unit for shaping the culture is the family. It's the matrix of all primary beliefs, hopes, and aspirations that a person carries through life. The family is the core of civilization, the most important, irreplaceable primary unit through which God has granted man participation in creation. Now, beyond the family, Tocqueville discovered a variety of private voluntary associations, people putting their efforts together to solve a local problem. This is the principle of subsidiarity, and that is important to both Protestant and Catholic thinking. It places the resolution of human issues at the level closest to the people affected. I did research all over the country, interviewing more than 300 people for my book, Street Saints, Renewing American Cities. I discovered people who are quietly renewing the nation, living their faith one by one and in small groups, mending hearts and souls with love. Now, how can we evaluate the effectiveness of faith-based organizations? Well, it's not easy. The great management guru Peter Drucker was asked. He said the answer lies in changed human hearts. You can see tangible evidence of that in changed behavior. So, the most effective services are based on one-on-one, face-to-face relationships over time. And this is true whether it's mentoring programs for prisoners or at-risk kids or recovering drug addicts. If the relationship is rooted in God and anchored in prayer, the likelihood of transformation is very high. Now, this isn't just academic research for me. My world expanded in very colorful directions that caused my family consternation occasionally. The people I wrote about became friends. So I found myself hanging out with a former gangster disciple in Fresno and a former meth cook in Houston. In San Antonio, when I drove up to Freddie and Ninfa Garcia's home, bullets were flying. Now, this was also an unusual sight because men's heads were bowed over Bibles where they were studying with Freddie and Ninfa. Anybody who wandered into their home late would see that Ninfa had a big pot of beans bubbling on the back burner. She would take in anyone who walked in off the streets, and that included guys who were strung out on meth or whatever, and people would stay up with them through the night, hold a basin for them to be sick in, find a blanket for them, and love them through the transition. The way she explained it is it was love in action. Now, when a group of visiting philanthropists disembarked from their bus the next day, they looked somewhat out of place in this barrio. Freddie leaned over and whispered to me, they would run out of here screaming if they knew how many felons were here in this room. Well, yeah, you kind of get used to that. The message that Freddie delivered that day was straightforward. He said, you could take a junkie and throw away his drugs, and all you have is a reformed junkie. But you can take an addict and give him Jesus Christ, and you have a totally transformed man. Freddie knows because he is one. He was a heroin addict, and he was so desperate for a fix that he laid his baby boy on the floor of a dirty men's station, and he was trying to shoot up. Now, in a lucid moment, which was rare for him, he looked at himself and looked at this baby and said, what kind of father am I? My God, what kind of father am I? So he asked God for help in kicking his addiction. There was a faith-based program that took him in. He then started one in his own living room. They would take an addict in, pray with him, talk to him, nurture him through the withdrawal, and then make a disciple out of him to help others do the same. Now, this is an old model. It goes back about 2,000 years. You take people in, you spend time with them, you pray with them, and they're new people. Addicts also end up in prison often. They'll tell you that starting a new life is really hard when you get out. They drop you off, give you a few dollars, you get out of the bus, and good luck starting a new life. Almost nobody wants to hire a felon. That's a rough thing for them. So I launched a program in Houston to help people in that situation become employable, to get ready for employment. We had interesting people there. A man named Michael had been in and out of prison his entire life, alternating incarceration with living under bridges. His parents had lived a similar life. love into communities, and they are lifting hurting people and loving them into wholeness. People like John Sage in Houston, his sister had been murdered. So he needed to get rid of the anger and the depression that he was carrying around with him. So he talked about it with other people who'd had similar experiences, and from that came the awareness there is healing in the telling. So he started a program for people like himself to go into prisons. They would take people who had committed crimes and talk to people who were the victims of crimes and tell their stories to each other. And to do that in the context of Scripture on reconciliation. Now, the prisoners are asked to write a letter to the person that they harmed, including someone who's no longer alive. They're also supposed to write a letter to someone in their family who was hurt by their absence, often a child. The act of asking for forgiveness brings about profound changes. The need for reconciliation runs through the nation. The civil rights movement called followers of Christ onto the streets to affirm the dignity and the rights of all men and women as spiritual brothers and sisters. As Martin Luther King reminded us, we are citizens of two kingdoms, the eternal and the temporal, knitted together by morality that transcends the boundaries between races. Man-made laws may draw boundaries, but only the higher law produces love. And it is also the only thing that Dr. King said produces obedience to the unenforceable. The higher law demands restraint and courage. The civil rights movement trained people not to return evil with evil. So if you got yanked off a drugstore counter, these courageous people were trained not to return evil with evil. It takes extraordinary self-control not to ratchet up the violence. When Jesus said, "Love your enemies," Martin Luther King reminded us, he was calling for agape, the love that is understanding and creative, redemptive goodwill for all men, an overflowing love that seeks nothing in return. Agape is the love of God operating in the human heart. Now, sometimes that fullness of love demands a response to wrong. People of faith led the way resisting communists. They risked their lives in a peaceful demonstration, facing down troops under orders to shoot them. And they ultimately brought about the fall of the Berlin Wall. I was in Germany at the time that this happened, and I interviewed people from Poland, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, all the way to Russia. And I wrote about these courageous people in my book, Candles Behind the Wall, Heroes of the Peaceful Revolution that Shattered Communism. Tens of thousands of people poured onto the streets, facing down troops under orders to shoot them. And they did this because of their faith. They prayed, and the only defense they had was a small candle that they carried. And in the end, the forces of peace won, toppling the Berlin Wall and unraveling the Soviet Empire. It was a revolution of the spirit first. Today in America, people of faith are binding up the unraveled fabric of civil society in tangible ways. We hold the threads individually, but when they're bound together, we can reweave a picture of order and beauty in human souls, woven in vibrant colors of love. This is the design of the Creator for which we were always intended. Love can only be lived in relationship. Human persons are not designed to be merely clients of social services. We've been given life by our Creator for so much more. We were made by love for love. We've been given the capacity to receive love, which is poured out over us freely, and we are to share it with others. This is the essence of what it means to be human. Augustine knew, "Our heart is restless, Lord, until it rests in thee." Faith calls us to serve our Lord and our fellow creatures. We pray to live integrated lives rooted in the earth while reaching toward heaven. As my friend Joseph Pierce has written, at the heart of all healthy societies and cultures is the presence of the good, the true, and the beautiful. The person of Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. The very life of beauty, shining forth in the glory of creation as the Word made flesh, as the poem that perfectly reflects the perfection of the poet. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. You know, I was sitting here and remember a few decades ago when I came to your graduation and how you taught those felons, those who had spent time behind bars, how to even do a job interview they didn't know. And I remember leaving something I've always remember, that when you look at maybe the background of a child, or you look at the terrible epidemic of drugs, there's not a big difference between people living under the bridge
Absolutely.
and people driving over the bridge in a fancy car.
Absolutely true.
And this is, as you know, how we opened this morning. In our comments, we talked about this is the goodness of America, and it comes from faiths of all faiths. And as one of our witnesses said earlier, when George Washington was president, they didn't have the money for these social services. It was the church. And again, this multifaceted church we have of so many faiths in our country today. Dr. Phil, you've had so many guests on your show. I'm just throwing this to you. You've had so many guests on your show that you've talked about their lives and God, and I know how that's impacted you, even moving your studios at one point to Texas, which we're proud to have you. But I just wanted to give it to you for a moment.
Well, I'd just like to start by saying you are a great lesson in judgment, because you're a lot tougher than you look.
Thank you.
I just have to say. But you are, I just want to echo that you are so right, because when you deal with these addicts that truly have no purpose and they have no meaning. I've had so many relate to me when they relapse, they do so because they basically have no reason not to. I mean, they just basically say that they have no reason not to. But for those who get on a path and find that higher purpose to serve God and to use their life in His service, you can't drag them back into that life because they don't have time for it. They don't have any justification for it. They've found a meaning. They've found a purpose. They've found a higher calling. And all of a sudden, the number one need in all people is acceptance. And there are synonyms for that, acceptance and belonging. And when they have a place to be, a purpose in this life, and you just gave so many case histories that prove that. Doesn't mean it's a success-only journey, but when they find that connection, that's the ingredient. That's it, and you've proven that over and over. And God bless you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. It is such a joy because people can discover that there is something beautiful inside through relationship. The Work Faith Connection, the organization, they practice hugging. There's a lot of hugging that goes on. And for these guys who have gotten out of prison, nobody's hugged them in years. And to have it in a chaste sense, it's the kind of hug that we're just saying, hey, love you, brother, and that's sometimes life-changing for them.
And eye contact. They make eye contact without challenge.
Yes. That's one thing we teach them. When you're going to do an interview, you have to look that person in the eye. No, they're used to looking down. You look up in prison, you're asking for trouble. Yeah. Everybody keeps their eyes down.
Yeah, it's eye contact without challenge. It's real
Exactly.
intimacy. It's real intimacy with someone.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you.
Pastor Paula, and then we'll go to the bishop and Dr. Carson.
Chairman, thank you. Professor Elliott, I'm just so excited over here hearing your story and your life work and all that you've done. You're just singing my tune. For over 40 years, I think about ministry for myself, whether it was in the LA riots. I lived there 2 years after the Rodney King beatings, or the church that we started in Tampa, Florida in 91. They doused a man with gasoline because of the color of his skin, and ambulance would not go in without a police escort, and I started going in and feeding the hungry and telling them about the love of God, and it grew into the second largest church in the nation at the time with 250 outreach ministries. I was reminded how I started ministry here 41 years ago. I lived in Frederick in a trailer, and someone brought me a turkey. And I was overwhelmed and felt like the most blessed person in the world. I'd just gotten saved about a year or so earlier, gave my life to the Lord. And I said, I've got to help someone. So I got on the BART, came down here to 2nd and D in Anacondia with an advocate by the name of Mitch Schneider. And I took half that turkey and started feeding. And I prayed a little prayer and said, God, can I spend the rest of my life doing this? Well, 41 years later, I've gotten to do this. And now at a level, and here comes the question comment. During COVID, we saw change because COVID changed everything. And that one turkey turned into a $5 billion program for me. I served at that time with President Trump at the Faith Initiative and Opportunity. Walked in his office when he was talking to the Secretary of Ag and saying, what are we going to do with this milk? What are we going to do with this supply? And I'm raising my hand. I said, I've got your answer. I've got your answer. He's like, Paula, well, you know nothing about supply. But I knew we had 384,000 houses of worship. And they were the ground army that could get it done. We cut out the middleman because we had to, and all the supply was done, and we did farmers to family. It was the first time churches had $1 billion program go through and was the most efficient, effective program to feed people. It was also the first time we could pray with people without being told by the middleman that went down to the food bank that you can distribute food because they need the churches, the synagogues, the mosque, but you cannot pray for people. Quite a religious liberty issue, Kelly. But we saw how effective it was, and this is one of the reasons I believe President Trump and I'm serving in this White House faith office. We see so much discrimination against people of faith. I worked on the first step, was a big proponent of getting that passed, worked with Jared, with everyone. And yet, we saw the same thing. Faith-based programs are about 80%, 88% successful. Secular only, under 20%. We see such a discrepancy. But when it comes to government and money, we see things like aid before it got dismantled. They checked off the box by giving money to 2 Christian organizations and 1 Catholic. That was it. And the rest got untold billions of dollars. Same thing on a state level, same thing in we don't just see discrimination in the court, Kelly. We see them in so many areas. And yet we see people of faith, all faiths, being the most successful at the ground game. Have you had any insight of what we can do to get that playing level or that playing field level?
I think the most helpful thing would be to stop silencing the faith factor in organizations that are doing good work. The requirement in order to receive government money has often been take the faith factor out. You can't pray with the people. You know, in this facility, you can have no people of Christian persuasion. Get the priests out of here, no nuns here, you know. Or if you do have them, they have to be silent about their faith. I mean, I talked to nuns in New York who couldn't pray with the recipients of their work. They're living at home, actually. I said, do you pray with people? Oh, no, we can't do that. Right. Really? I mean, if you silence the faith factor, you are taking out the one thing that makes Christian organizations uniquely effective. Mentoring programs. I've been in a mentoring program at the local school. So a program that was with Kids Hope, you adopt a school near your church. and you can send mentors in. They pick the kids, so you get the worst, the most maladjusted, and we start with them in the first grade. But we can't pray with them, so we've had prayer partners off-site pray. Prayer goes through, walls are permeable, to prayer. We found that. So they pray off-site for that partnership, and the mentor goes in and meets with the child once a week. It actually works in a strange way, because of the prayer permeable factor. But how much better would it be if we'd been able to sit down with the children ourselves and pray for them person to person? So that's the kind of thing that just puts a ludicrous constraint on the most effective, life-changing factor. So removing that would be helpful.
Bishop Barron?
Yeah, thanks so much for the presentation. I thought it was very thought-provoking. And what it provoked in me was this, that hospitals as we know them came up out of the church. Universities as we know them. John Paul II reminded us, ex cordie ecclesiae, from the heart of the church. The church has been bold in the way it moves into the public space. I wonder, have we religious people been too cowed by a secular society that wants us to privatize the faith, and that we haven't seized the opportunity of the First Amendment? We'll make no laws restricting the free exercise of religion. Good, then we shouldn't stay in our little, self-imposed ghettos, but rather, no, Congress will make no laws preventing it, so let's invade that space. I wonder if we've been so affected, almost psychologically, by the wall of separation and the etiquette of privatizing our faith. That image of the nuns, no, I'm not going to pray. Well, there's just something that's obviously opposed to religion, but also opposed to the best instincts of our own First Amendment. That's what was provoked in my mind during your talk.
Well, thank you for that. I love your bold thought. Have we just been cowed because that is the ethos? Is that actually the law, the intention of the law? I'm inclined to say no. So no law limiting the exercise thereof. Well, it seems to me that is the exercise thereof. Think about the separation of church and state. That wall was not intended to inhibit the churches. The wall was to protect them. That's what Jefferson meant. That's what he was saying. The wall is there to protect the churches. We're taking it as a barrier that can't be breached for any reason. I even talked to a banker once asking him for a donation. He said, "Oh, I can't give to your nonprofit because of the separation of church and state." Like, wait a minute. You're not a church, you're not the state, and I'm not either. What is the problem? If you don't want to give, that's fine. But it's a strange application that we think we have. So I agree with you. We need to be more bold.
As Jude said, contend earnestly. Dr. Carson, and then I'll go to Carrie, and we have a few minutes left. Dr. Carson.
Well, Professor, I really appreciated that very positive spin that you put on everything. It's wonderful. There's so much negativity associated with religion in many aspects. Even when you look at the Ten Commandments, the last half of them are things that you shouldn't do. And, Jesus reversed that when he said, love your neighbor as yourself. That encompasses everything. It's so important. But when I was secretary at HUD, there were so many restrictions in place when I first got there about things that you couldn't do, weren't supposed to do, particularly for faith-based organizations. And we started a program called the Mustard Seed Program, in which we looked for faith-based organizations that were doing very positive things in the community. And instead of giving them a checklist of things that they had to check off, we just said, the proof is in the pudding. It's what they're doing. And we can support that with federal dollars. Do you think that's a good use of federal money?
What could they use it to do?
Programs that they were successfully conducting.
Continue what they were doing that was successful. I mean, that seems good on the face of it if they are given the latitude to be true to who they are, to do what they do it with integrity, do it in a way that is building civic virtue and changing lives in a tangible way for the good.
Exactly. And, the Bible says in the book of James, pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is to visit the fatherless and the widows and to keep himself unspotted from the world. And I think when we look at all these various things that we've been talking about, it's the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, the head of one of the foundations that I talked to several years ago said, look, all of these checklists we go in and best practices and yada, yada. He said, I just walk into a place and I can tell you, after 15 minutes of talking to the people who run it, are they people of integrity? Are they producing results? Give them the money. I said, I love your attitude.
Carrie will be our last questioner of the morning session. Go ahead, Carrie.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for being here. You really, truly embody goodness, beauty, and truth, and we need more professors like you in the world. So my question to you is really, and it's sort of a comment. I'm a young mother, 38 years old, just turned 38. I don't know if you're a mother as well.
Yes.
But there's a lot of, excuse me?
And a grandmother.
Oh, and a grandmother, okay. There's a lot of mothers that I think are burdened today. And we are burdened by this idea that truth is subjective. That is what our children are learning in school. That is what the culture is teaching them, that they can choose whatever they want to be today. They can be a cat, they can be a dog, they can be a monkey if they want. What would you say, what would be your advice if you could look mothers, American mothers, in the face right now and talk to them and say, what would you tell them to make sure that their children don't sway, that they don't believe the lies that they're being told? And what can we do as a culture to bring back goodness, beauty, and truth?
Wow. Big question, big task. I think we are given the opportunity to instill in our children an understanding that there is truth, and it doesn't vary. But we have to be able to talk about it in a way that makes it positive. Tell them about God from a very, very early age. Tell them about Scripture, that from a very early age. Read it with them. Introduce them to people who are doing good things to serve others. Introduce them to people who are leading heroic lives of faith. They need to meet people of faith. And I think giving them an opportunity to try to do something themselves. Very young. Take one of their toys and bring it to a ministry where they can give it to a child face to face. Instill the habit of giving. But I think you have to live it, first of all. You have to limit their intake of all of the other culture out there. We were very, very strict in what they could watch and what they could read. I mean, it had to pass the parental filter test, and, not a lot of movies made it through. But, we controlled the cable, and we unplugged it. I mean, there was a time we were just off cable television altogether. My son wanted to watch a soccer game from a European one, and it was on in the middle of the night because of time difference. And he went over to a friend's house to watch it. He said, Tommy, why don't you just watch it at home? Well, my parents are Amish. We have to be able to instill an awareness in our children that they are swimming upstream and that they are tasked with a wonderful thing to do. They can be warriors against it. They're charged to speak the truth and live it and not care if everybody believes with them. They need to be able to gird up their loins and put on the armor and be warriors for the culture, but for truth. Be different. It's good to be different because, the vast sea out there is a mess. So get in your lifeboat and row. They have to understand that they are special and precious, but definitely swimming upstream. And to just keep loving them, keep bolstering them, keep reading the books they're bringing home, keep talking to their friends. I mean, it's a war out there. We need to be fighting in a winsome way, but don't accept the great culture out there. Live in the culture that is true and beautiful and good.
We have asked every witness today if you were sitting across from the president in the Oval Office, because we are going to advise and report to him at the end of this sometime about a year from now. What would you say to him that he should do as president to ensure that people of faith have the religious liberty to do all the things that you have talked about?
Let faith-based groups be true to their mission, true to their calling, and not be hindered by the government in any way. Don't make the mistake of thinking that giving funding is the most valuable thing the government can do. Getting out of the way is sometimes the most valuable thing they can do. But let them be true to who they are.
Barbara, fantastic testimony. Please give her a round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks.
We will, just 5 minutes behind, pretty good for everything that happened this morning. So we'll break for lunch. Please be back in your seats at 1. The commission stands in recess until 1 p.m.
All right.